Well, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. My name is An Chung-young, Chairman of the Korea Commission for Corporate Partnership. I'm really delighted and very honored to moderate this session. Can Aiib expedite the regional comprehensive economic partnership and be compatible with Adb? First of all, let me introduce our distinguished panelists. To my left, first Professor Yoshino, who is now the president, right? Dean. Asia Development Bank Institute in Tokyo, and he's been professor of international finance and banking development, leading expert in Japan. Well, we met several occasions, many international conferences. In fact, he just flew from Kazakhstan to be on time here about 30 minutes ago. Thank you very much for your great efforts. Let's welcome. And then next, I'm so delighted to introduce Professor Peter Drysdale. I have known him about now almost 2 decades, and he just flew from the Australia yesterday, right? Although he caught cold a little bit, but I'm so happy to see you again. He is, I call him a guru on the East Asian regionalism, ranging from the trade, investment, and a regional movement such as APEC and TPP, and also the Rcep. Finally, but not least, my colleague from China, Zhang Yonglin, who is the director of Chinese Social Academy of Science, my longtime friend. He is the expert at China's modern economic development, institutional development. He's been almost the spokesman of China's academic society. So I believe we truly have very experienced and great expertise on this issue. Well, ladies and gentlemen, very recently, the 3 great multilateral institutions have been developed in East Asia, well, for them in Asia as well as Asia Pacific. The first one is the Aiib, just founded by China. In fact, launched this year. And another one is Trans-Pacific Partnership, which 12 Asia-Pacific economies concluded the last year, and is likely to become one of the largest mega trade agreement. And then another one, the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership, in which ASEAN 10 economies, and China, Japan, Korea, and Australia, New Zealand, and India, a total of 16, the East Asian economies are now negotiating. And so Rcep is scheduled to be concluded within this year. So I can see that the 3 great institutions, they either launched or concluded or under a serious, negotiation process. So in this regard, I think this newly founded Aiib is likely to have a great impact on the ongoing mega trade deals in the Asia Pacific under China's leadership. The way I see it, when the U.S. As well as Japan really pushed very hard to conclude TPP, and then, to me, I mean, in response to the U.S. And Japanese initiative, and China pushed the Aiib, to get launched, and at the moment, the 58 economies joined the Aiib. without the United States and Japan. And well, as you know, well, United States dominate the International Monetary Fund, and Japan is also the largest shareholder, Asia Development Bank. So politically, what I thought was that this maybe, early launching of the AIIB and the conclusion of the TPP is representing sort of the economic hegemonic, the leadership struggle between China and the United States. That is one of my view. And so in response to early conclusion of TPP, China and the ASEAN leadership is also pushing through very hard regional comprehensive economic partnership. So the first question is that the newly founded AIIB is likely to expedite ongoing, mega trade and investment deals like the, Rcep, TPP already, concluded. And perhaps launching of the AIIB might also motivate the initial signatory member countries of TPP might ratify, as early as possible, although presidential candidate in the United States, Hillary Clinton and, Donald Trump having, different opinion. So in this regard, how you see it? I mean, they are interrelated deeply, or this totally we can separate them as launching of AIIB is another thing. So in this regard, Professor Peter Drysdale, can you share with us what your view on this three institutional development, the interrelationship?
Well, actually, I think these two policy strategies emerged out of different milieu. I don't think there's a close connection between these two policy strategies. AIIB emerged out of China's interest in being a part of the action, in mobilizing its own savings and international savings to service investment in the context of the global financial crisis and the priority that was increasingly attached to investment not only in the developed world but also in the emerging world around infrastructure demands. So that had a particular evolution in that context. I think TPP is emerged in another milieu altogether, basically around the interest of the US President Obama in mobilizing the policy will in the United States to engage more closely with Asia, and especially through trade liberalization efforts, when other efforts at trade liberalization in the WTO and so on had fallen by the wayside. So I think they emerged out of different policy milieus. Now, at the edges, you might say, as you did, that there's a bit of competition around these developments between the two major powers in the Pacific, China and United States. But I don't think when you go down to the core of it, that competition is direct or comprehensive over those particular policy strategies. So I think, as I see it, of course, the mirror to TPP is Rcep, which was an ASEAN strategy to secure an agenda for trade liberalization and economic reform in East Asia beyond the economies which were engaged in TPP. And that agenda was linked tightly to the ASEAN agenda for the development of the ASEAN economic community. So that's the context in which there's a contest of strategies across the Pacific for reform and trade liberalization more than AIIB. AIIB, of course, was the idea that AIIB should be pursued by the Chinese was a consequence of China's really not been able to add equity to the established multilateral development institutions in the immediate future, ADB or the World Bank, and looking for a relevant way to contribute to the recycling of funds in the region. This is a multilateral initiative. It's not a Chinese initiative. That's the first important. China might have the largest equity in it, as Japan had the largest equity in the ADB when the ADB was established, and that equity is gradually corroded after time. But it's very much a multilateral institution subject to governance principles and arrangements which will be intensely scrutinized in the multilateral community and are being. So I don't see it as in any sense a direct threat to U.S. influence or sway in the region.
Okay, Dr. Chang Young-lin, when the AIIB was announced by Chinese government and the critics in Washington D.C., they suggested that China is somehow linked AIIB along the one road, one belt, the idea. Then many thought that, hey, this is to serve a Chinese interest rather than, multilateral. Although, as Professor Peter Drysdale said, that this is multilateral, not unilateral, the funding agency. And furthermore, many, worried that the governance of AIIB would be not really matching sort of the best practice, prevailed at the International Monetary Fund or Asia Development Bank. So, how would you like to respond to this?
I share the view, of Professor Drysdale, because I remember the story when we discussed about that AIIB. One background that is about ASEAN's initiative of connectivity. So because when ASEAN announced this connectivity, and China, Japan, Korea all showed its strong support. But one thing we find, which is lack of, that is money, how to finance. ASEAN only set up $1 billion fund. And then the three other countries, though they show the strong report, but still there is no way how to finance. And also this, that's I think I remember how to discuss finance this connectivity. And also for China itself, that if you see China's map, the connectivity to the neighbor countries need a lot of money. And there are few roads and railways. So also you need some multilateral financial institution. ADB can provide formally, very limited on this direct infrastructure projects, only for research or only, some very small seed money for that. And also I think there is some story behind that. So what kind of China's role can, in this regional integration? And China surely is not the leader of FTA because it's as a developing country. It can participate and active, but China, we had a discussion, for instance, we have a lot of reserves, foreign exchange reserves. How to use this foreign exchange reserves become a big thing for people to discuss. And this is a way, to, if you see now the China contribute the fund to AIIB and also set up a separate the fund of the Silk Road, and also provide the fund for new DB, that new development bank of BRICS countries. So you see, this is a way where China, I think, find its place to play a role. That's one thing. So I share the view that it seems there is no direct relation of a U.S. Proposal of TPP, and even no, I think direct relation of RCEP. Concerning your, the question about the criticism, you said a lot of criticism. I have not seen so many. Now only probably U.S. and Japan, and most countries now support. And I think increasing now, as said by the president of a bank, Jin, and now there are more than 30 countries are waiting for join. So more and more countries now try to join because they find this really, a new multilateral institution. We can play a special role to finance the infrastructure projects. Because the developing countries, though the liberalization is good, but liberalization is not enough because you need a lot of improvement of internal environments. The infrastructure is one of the key, areas which need to be improved. But the problem is the bank, it's the money. So multilateral bank, unlike the direct bilateral fund, and I can in the future can issue the bonds and can, get the fund from other international institutions, and so it can, play a big role for for this regional financial institution. So I think also China is announced again and again welcome U.S. and Japan to join. And the criticism on this China share is too big. I always argue if you join, the China share will naturally decline. So U.S. and both Japan and U.S. will have a larger share. So I think this is innovation by the world, right? But China just make initiative. China from beginning tried to make it, as a real multilateral institution. If you see the first Aiib funded project, it's cooperated together with Adb, rather than it did it lonely. So I think we'll see. The time probably wait is and to see, and it's really not China's dominated because the Europeans are there, and a lot of big players are there, and it's impossible for China to dominate. And also, as I mentioned, this idea from beginning, we need a collective, capacities to finance infrastructure. China itself cannot do that. So it's silly enough if China want to just, provide all these funds to finance that infrastructure projects. We all realize that there is, the danger there, and they need a longer time to get it back, and so on. So I think probably Aiib should be enlarged in the future. And yes.
Look, Japan has been promoting the open trade regime, through the APEC, as well as Japan aggressively pushed TPP, and then what I thought was that when China extended the invitation to join Aiib to Japan as well as United States, but Japan, US declined the invitation. So, as Zhang Yongyin said, the Aiib is likely to enhance, intra-regional connectivity, entire the Asia. Then the benefit of the Aiib could be, spread all over the Asia-Pacific economy, including Japan and the United States. Why, Japan has not accepted the invitation?
I think first TPP and free trade.
Okay, yeah, sure.
And then next I'd like to talk about the infrastructure investment and Aiib. When Prime Minister Abe became the Prime Minister, we have always a breakfast meeting together with the business people and academics. Then breakfast meeting was very interesting. All the big companies, President said, we want to push TPP, free trade. Why Prime Minister Abe is so slow? That is the large companies. Obstacle comes from small and medium-sized enterprises and agriculture. So industrial sectors are pushing Prime Minister Abe. That is the stance of TPP from Japan. Then AIIB, I have prepared a few slides, so I'd like to talk about first the ADB and AIIB work together. This is a clear statement by President Nakao at the ADB annual meeting. And President Jin from AIIB and President Nakao ADB. Because Asia requires huge amount of money for infrastructure. So AIIB alone cannot do it, and ADB alone cannot satisfy those needs. However, the problem is second line from the bottom. Bankable projects are not so many. And how to increase the rate of return of those investments are the key for both AIIB and ADB. And another point, the difference between ADB and AIIB. ADB has regional office of all member countries. So when ADB starts infrastructure investment, regional office looked at the economic performance predictions based on political and economics. So AIIB needs those information. And I think, as you mentioned, Japanese government attitude toward AIIB and ADB's attitude toward AIIB are completely different. ADB is willing to do jointly everything. And then that is one big difference. Then next, I'd like to talk about infrastructure investment. I think the problem of infrastructure investment is we are always looking at the direct effect. There are three effects from infrastructure investment. One is direct effect. It comes from infrastructure itself. But spillover effects are much, much bigger compared to direct effect. Spillover effects means infrastructure investment can invite private capital into the region, and then employment will be created. So green portion and yellow portions are the portion of spillover effects. And rate of return only comes from direct effects, are very small. That's why bankable projects in Asian regions are scarce. But if we bring those green and yellow portion returned to the investors for infrastructure, then the rate of return would have been much, much bigger. So this is the estimate of, what I have done in various cases. For example, this is Manila's highway. Rate of return from this Manila highway is not so large. However, the spillover effects will make it a difference in difference method in econometrics. Then these are the tax revenues from this highway. T0 is the completion of this highway. Then T+1, T+2. Please look at Batangas city, the last city. Then third year and fourth year, because of spillover effects, the tax revenue has almost doubled. If these tax revenues, 20 or 30% can be returned to the investors, then the rate of return and bankable project would become much, much bigger. So far, all the impact of rate of return comes from just highway itself. So I think that utilization of spillover effects, and then that spillover effects contribute tax revenues into the region. So if part of those tax revenue were returned to the investors of highway, that will increase the bankable projects. So I think both AIIB and ADB has to work together. But the spillover effects has to be returned to the investors partly. And that will make the bankable projects much more.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
I mean, on just two aspects. I think there's another kind of spillover effect, which is vastly underestimated when you think about what the initiation of the AIIB really means. Because, you're taken in the context of the infrastructure financing gap. The AIIB, for that matter, the Adb or the World Bank will make a trivial contribution to the whole financing of the infrastructure gap in Asia and around the world. No question about that. So, why should we be a little bit excited about the AIIB's establishment? Well, we should be a little bit excited because, as I think you're saying now, Yuki, the establishment of these institutions and the function that these institutions serve is actually preparing the ground for bringing bankable projects forward. The absence of bankable projects is a consequence of what Yun Ling described as the domestic and institutional problems in investor countries. And the banks serve a critically important role in improving that environment, basically. And that's why it's important that China be involved in this, because China has its own, like Japan, has its own massive development investment program, much larger than AIIB. And there's a spillover effect from participation in a multilateral institution like AIIB and cooperation through AIIB with Adb in improving the investment environment in which infrastructure investment projects will be brought forward in the region. So I think that's a really important aspect of the AIIB initiative that's somewhat missing. Not that it's going to contribute massively directly to the financing of the whole infrastructure financing gap problem, but it's going to change the environment fundamentally, especially the growing part of the environment, which involves China's participation in this process, which is an important development. Just one other thing that I might mention about the TPP issue. On the TPP, as you said, the direct interest for Japan and the United States around Japan's kind of struggling with its reform agenda with stagnation, I think was very powerful in this agreement. So I think more than anything else, the TPP can be seen as having made a congenial environment within which Japan and the United States could do a free trade agreement with each other. That's the most important development from TPP. And the question now is what we do next, basically. And of course, the ASEANs, the Indonesians in particular, said, well, what we have to do next is mobilize the same kind of will in the rest of East Asia through the RCEP process. And then there's a question of, how these two processes will connect up down the track. And that's the big question going forward, how to make the developments in TPP, if they're finally legislated in the United States, and the negotiation of the RCEP agreement compatible over time.
Peter, let me ask this question. I received your comments on the questions I listed. Okay, you mentioned that the fact that the United States and Japan had declined the invitation to join AIIB, and their behavior is somehow churlish. And furthermore, I think Lawrence Summer also expressed a similar opinion.
I did write that.
Is very much not auspicious. That's what his comment.
No, well, I did write that, and I still believe it's true. It was badly handled in the United States, and I think many in the U.S. administration would admit that it was badly handled in the United States. The fact of the matter is that the United States could not have easily, in fact, it's almost impossible for the United States to be a capital contributor to the AIIB, an equity contributor to AIIB, because it has to carry such legislation of approvals through the US Congress, and that was a no-brainer. They couldn't do that. And so then it became a matter of explaining why they couldn't do that. They used the wrong explanations, although there were powerful forces around the administration on the security side that would argue in a perverse way that the AIIB was a threat to America's security interests in the region. Indeed, they put that argument to a number of other countries, including Korea and Australia, and I'm sure Japan as well. Though, eventually we resisted that argument and joined up with Aiibga, it was a pretty weak argument, frankly. So, I think that's the starting point of where the United States got itself into. Japan, had a different set of interests and circumstances that conditioned its initial response to this. It's partly influenced by that out of the United States, that thinking out of the United States, but also influenced, of course, by the then contemporary difficulties between Japan and China in political relationships, especially over the East China Sea. So I think they have their explanations, but they have little to do with the rationale, as Naoyuki said, of actually Japanese support and ADB support for the development of Aiibga. They are external to that.
Hey, Naoyuki, Yoshino, you mentioned that great economic impact of the infrastructure investment in your production function, right? And as Peter Drysdale mentioned that this, rather pity, Japan and the United States have not joined the Aiibga. My question is that, okay, down the road, is Japan likely to join the Aiibga? Well, I also did receive the comments prepared by Jang Young-lin, and he indicated that this, if current, bilateral sort of regionalism going on, and that Japan might stay outside the Aiibga. So, what is your view on this?
I think there are two views. From ADB side, we should do together, as I had mentioned. And that is a strong message. And President Nakao, I think, he talked to Prime Minister Abe about his opinion. Yeah. And Prime Minister Abe has to also look at the United States. So that is why he's not yet decided to join or not. However, Japanese contribution to ADB and the ADB's money is going to Aiibga together. So in that sense, there's an indirect cooperation between ADB and Aiibga is already starting, even though politically it is not openly said.
Yeah. Young-lin, you said the 30 economies now waiting to join the Aiibga, and I thought the ADB also developed a great expertise in terms of the needs for infrastructure development and the financing capability. So it definitely requires a sort of very close coordination between Aiibga and the ADB to make the Aiibga's project more economical and
My Japanese friend is give a very smart answer, try to avoid whether Japan would not join or not. So just a few days ago, I had a discussion with a delegation from Japan and the high delegation. So the similar question asked them. The answer is, so long as Mr. Abe and his party on the power will not consider to join. Probably that's a clearer answer than you. And I think it's really a mistake from beginning. They think it's a political, initiative by China try to mitigate the U.S. and Japan's role, which I argue that there is some Chinese thinking behind what kind of role China can play, but really the infrastructure it's a field which never in the past we have such a capacity to finance. It's a big gap. Concerning Aiibga itself, I think since the pressure is so big, you see, until now it works quite well. They, depends on depend on China, depend on the group themselves. And they now, as I know, they carefully evaluate so many applications. They try to evaluate very carefully and enrolled really a high standard, groups of experts from all over the world. It's quite so. Most of stuff's coming from other countries rather than from China. So I think it's really still on the trial base. How to find a way to finance this infrastructure projects, which now we have this integration of the market, but we have no integration of the land. So the country still, have a great gap. And in the past, we mostly the convenient road is sea itself, by the sea. But the land countries, you see, have a great gap. So there is also some ideas behind of one belt and one road. China try to create something, initiate something, mobilize the resources and support from all sides to connect this land and sea areas. So I think there are something that our world has come today. What we need, to do. One, of course, is liberalization, but another one is really developing issues now emerged. That is also behind why Doha round we call the development round, because it fails. And so AIIB, this kind of idea is probably something we try to fill this gap from the other direction, rather than through this multilateral negotiations and so on. So this is. I hope that also, if you see that NDB, there are also the other proposals, like Shanghai Organization. They are still under discussion whether they set up a bank or, so such a kind of financial institutions, I think, is a really high need. And it's only through the multilateral approach, because there is a great risk. And I also, share that all these institutions should work together. World Bank president announced very clearly, they have the, techniques, they have experience, and ADB, have branches and, the finance projects. So they really can work together. And rather than its alternative approach. There is no one institution now which could play all kind of roles. But concerning TPP, I think a few words. Also, I think from beginning, U.S. make it as too political. As Obama said, we should make the rule rather than let China to make the rule. It's a very, very highly politicized. And also the same story as AIIB from beginning. And immediately think, that's probably U.S. way of thinking. They think and everything should led by the U.S. to make the rules. And I don't think, the TPP may be good for the future, but I don't think every country can join it. So that is why Rcep try to create a different kind of model. That's not easy, because there are, especially Japan, Australia, they're all members. So always they try to catch up the standards of TPP. That's try to create a different TPP. That's impossible. But these 6 economies are quite different. So, and also I think how to help of this regional arrangements, to move toward multilateral. That's a crucial matter, because TPP considered to be the future of WTO in the future. That's also impossible.
Young Lin, you and I, we are economists, right? Political scientists now looking at the AIIB in a different perspective. This is a way of realizing long-cherished Chinese dream. dating back, Tang Dynasty or something like that, reviving the old, One Belt, Silk Road. And furthermore, China has been, acquiring a lot of these foreign companies which has the right to cultivate the natural resources through very active M&A process. Therefore, many small countries, fear about the China's, such quick rise, utilizing such massive foreign exchange reserve. And so as a result, this is this Aiib project, although you mentioned that, this multilateral funding agency and, we need to collaborate with the Adb and the, International Monetary Fund. So this is political scientist assessment. Does you, agree with this, or is it totally, different? What is your view on this, Frank? Yeah, after Young Nils respond, and then I'll get back to you. Oh, okay, you want to go first?
I think whatever the political message is, Asian countries require lots of infrastructure investment. So the financing needs is huge. So I think it is very important even for those countries to establish infrastructure. However, they have to look at the purpose of those infrastructure investment. Mm-hmm. For example, in Jeju, Jeju Island infrastructure is for tourism. It is not the infrastructure for manufacturing industries. And Japan failed to construct lots of infrastructure in all over the places, just focusing on industrial infrastructure. We have Hokkaido, Northern Island. That is very good for tourism. Then they should not create infrastructure for manufacturing industries. So Silk Road is the same. Silk Road may be useful for tourism and not so for manufacturing. Then that the construction of the infrastructure should be different. So that is one. And secondly, I think infrastructure investment itself is financing need is there. However, many hotels and shopping malls has to be created along those roads in here. That's why Jeju has developed. So that means not only infrastructure finance, but also financing for small businesses in this region and restaurants, hotels, that has to come together. So private sector money together with those infrastructure create a success of infrastructure investment. And as far as TPP and Rcep is concerned, TPP, Japan and US exchange rate is freely floated. But in many Asian countries, they have managed fraud or basket currencies and so on. So the exchange rate mechanism also affects the negotiation of those trade agreements. That's why the Rcep, ASEANs are different from only Japan, US, or Australia.
Peter, can I? Okay, Australia is in a sense outside, along the One Belt, One Road route, but you are very enthusiastic in advocating the creation of Aiib as well as the TPP. The Rcep. You mentioned that the Rcep is likely to be principle-based. And many critics say that this TPP is setting a new trade rules, including intellectual property right, anti-corruption, and the labor standard, the environmental standard. However, the quality of the Rcep is far behind. But you insist that Rcep is very much principle-based. So could you, share why you comment like that?
Just on the One Belt, One Road thing, we don't consider ourselves outside the framework of One Belt, One Road. We're the southern anchor of it, in a sense. So we have a strong interest in One Belt, One Road. But that's a much more open book in terms of the framework within which the initiatives through One Belt, One Road will be developed either with bilateral partners of China or plurilaterally between groups of countries and Chinese funding institutions. So I think that's a very different kind of mechanism from the Aiib mechanism, which, as I said before, is very much China's contribution to building a multilateral institution to finance infrastructure. we're in TPP, of course, but you know, for us and the others, the relevance of being in TPP is much less than the relevance of Japan's being in TPP. And the way in which TPP has been structured, frankly, with respect to the developing countries that are in it, Malaysia and Vietnam and so on, is not a high-quality agreement at all. It's an agreement which does horse trades around trade diversion, not only between these countries and countries outside the TPP, but also between these countries and countries inside the TPP. So I think, you know, down the track, it's an open question as to whether or not TPP will be the global benchmark for trade reform. Rcep, as Yung Ling has said, is built on a different sort of principle. The most important difference between Rcep and TPP, because it includes many countries of different stages of development and so on, different systems, institutions, and so on. It has, as an important, it's a key adjunct to it, a development agenda, economic cooperation agenda. And the implementation of the agreements within Rcep will take place over a period of time. The target date is 2025. And the economic cooperation agenda will be critical to effective implementation of Rcep should the agreement be reached. I mean, I think it's an open question as to whether or not Yung Ling has said correctly that it's a very difficult, much more difficult negotiation to complete because of the diversity of economies involved. Nonetheless, there's quite a momentum has been building up in the negotiation of the process. I think whether that translates into successful negotiation of agreement that is high standard and has a delivery agenda through the economic cooperation agenda that really over time strengthens and lifts up the standards in the region will very much depend on whether or not political leadership sees interest in capturing this agenda in the region. And critically, that political leadership there, it's got to involve China, it's got to involve Japan. It won't be, China can't easily kind of take the lead on this, so it's got to involve smaller and middle power mobilization of the effort. And as we know, you know, Indonesia is not exactly kind of strong on these issues at the moment. So there's still a way to go on it, but there is, I think, a powerful set of circumstances which would see Rcep turning into a much stronger agreement than it certainly looks like to people in Washington seeing it as a kind of dirty kind of agreement rather than an agreement which is seeking to achieve many of the objectives that the TPP achieves on the trade front at least, and in a way that is truly regional in basis, so rules of origin which are not differentiated among the bilateral partners in the agreement, not as is the case with TPP. So the jury's out, but the circumstances in which Rcep might turn into a powerful force for reform and liberalisation in East Asia, I think, are there for the taking now. The question is whether or not in China or in Japan or in Southeast Asia, for that matter, in Australia and New Zealand and India, there's a focus and will to make that happen.
Mm-hmm. Hey, Yung Lin, let me ask this question. Indeed, the leaders of the Rcep member economy, in a sense, highly motivated after looking at, hey, TPP, now locking up the conclusion. And then I thought they agreed to conclude within this year on perhaps China's and ASEAN leadership, right? Now, unless the TPP is ratified by the U.S. Congress during the lame duck session of Obama administration, it is, I don't know, it's very perhaps unlikely to even pass next, U.S. Congress in early period, because Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump having different views, and even they're suggesting that they renegotiate the whole package of TPP deal. If that happens, you think this the early conclusion of the RCEP could be delayed? And what is Chinese view if TPP side is lost the steam because of ongoing the presidential race in the U.S.?
Until now, the Chinese leaders make it very clearly in many occasions and push this region to conclude RCEP by the end of the year. They use many occasions now. But as I have been informed, the negotiation, as I mentioned, is not easy, because one problem is the TPP members try to make it on a higher, always, to take a TPP agreement as some kind of a standard, push all the countries try to reach that high standard. But we have India, we have, I don't know, Indonesia, the president announced to join TPP, but it seems not possible at all. But so there is still find a way how to make a compromise. Until now, the technical teams are working very hard, but they are still working in the very traditional areas. Now, until now, and still almost a half of the year, and still working on the traditional, customs procedures and customaries and all this has not moved to further for some other areas, new areas, and also even that economic cooperation area, how to show its differences from TPP, which only, liberalization focused. So I think still it may be not. I think there is no any relation to TPP, but the problem is now we have many members of TPP, they try to make it. And as I told Japan, push hard, very hard until now during the negotiation, try to make it, compatible to that. But it seems other countries have a big problem to accept. For China, I think just stayed in a little bit of a over middle level, because as China is managing to do two things. One is to push hard to go to a high standard, negotiate with the U.S. and EU on BIT, and at the same time to experiment within the country and the free trade zones, try to to make the country itself to compatible to this quick, comprehensive liberalization. So still there are a lot of domestic problems how to go further. Even this is put a big pressure on the negotiation team. So I think as we discussed with Peter, we have a group in the past. Probably if you want to make it a success, and it's only way to make a basic agreement first, and then to make a clear, identified design process of further upgrade the process. So and there is only way. You cannot TPP once for all agreement, and though it's not a very high standard, but however they have to agree on almost every area. So that's for India, for Indonesia, there's a lot of practical problems how to reach this agreement. I think so. For TPP, I don't know. It seems now there are some problems how to ratify this.
Specifically, if ratification of TPP process is delayed, in the near future, now what would be Japan's position? You try to work harder to conclude the RCEP? How Japan would like to go?
Okay, I think Japan has two aspects, as I mentioned. Companies, manufacturing, especially large companies, want to push TPP. However, agricultural sectors and small businesses are opposing it. However, agricultural sector in Japan has a very big turning point right now. More than 90% of agricultural farmers are over 50 years of age. And more than 70% of farmers are over 60 years of age. And Japanese agriculture has a very unique character. After World War II, all the peasants has received their piece of land. So we have achieved equality very well. But each farmer started to cultivate their own piece of land. So scale merit has been lost. But now this is a very good chance because all the farmers are already old. Then the big company comes into the new farm. Then they can create a scale economy. So I think Japanese government wants to use this opportunity for the turning point even for agriculture.
Same thing for Korea.
Yeah. So I hope that this PPP will keep on going. That will change the structure of the agriculture system in Korea and Japan.
Okay, very good. And hey, gentlemen, I personally, along with a bunch of the Korean the economists who are searching for a peaceful and unified Korean peninsula. Former Prime Minister Nam Do-gu came up with the idea of establishment Northeast Asia Development Bank to accommodate a rapidly the rising demand to utilize a great the potential to cultivate northeastern region, including 3 provinces of China and North Korea, South Korea, even part of the Russian Far East and Japan, Mongolia. Now, we proposed this idea, I think almost now 3 decades, okay, and having gone through the UN, the DP consultation meetings, so forth. But after seeing Aiibga concentrating on one belt, one road policy and deviating from the China's attention along this area, but yet including Changji 2 development program, and here. I would like to see that the Northeast Asia Development Bank, come through. Japan has not been enthusiastic on this, and so, Jang Young-lim, please tell us how we can go about this.
First, find a way how to make the peace on Korean Peninsula, because without the North Koreans' participation. It seems, I think it's a future role have 2 kind of major roles. One that is to support the integration, including infrastructure development in the Northeast Asia region. Another one, of course, is to help the North Korea, economic development. So without that, you see, I think China will support it, but I don't think it's the right time. Now, so.
I mean, it's a natural vehicle for supporting the adjustment that's got to be made around any kind of settlement in North Korea, peaceful or otherwise, frankly, with North Korea, peaceful or otherwise. I was at a conference the other day in which people were talking about a North Korean collapse problem, and everybody thought it was a great idea to establish a Northeast Asian bank to deal with that. But without, as Yun-Ning says, a framework of political accommodation with the North Koreans to do that, it doesn't make sense as an immediate initiative. If it's part of a package which sees negotiation of a deal with North Korea in the 6-party talks framework or some other framework, then it makes a lot of sense. And it makes a lot of sense to do it now, when as soon as we possibly can, because the mobilization of capital to do that now is going to be much cheaper than it would be at other times, basically.
Japanese Foreign Ministry once sponsored the international, seminar, how we can, develop the idea of the Northeast Asia, development. Japanese, Gamucho.
I think I have two comments. One is even current international organization, ADB and Aiib, can develop this northeastern region for infrastructure and so on. So even in this current status, I think whether we should focus on India, Southeast Asia, and we should also focus on this northern eastern part of China and so on. So I think we can do it even in current system. That is one comment. And one more is, I was in Manchuria, in northern part of China. Then I found out there are lots of connections with North Korea and those people. And some of the professors, they are coming from North Korea. So I think there is some kind of a close connection, not only South Korea, but also Chinese part. And that can make some compromise between North Korea and then China. So that was my.
You see that initiative made by UN, that is a Great Truman Project. It is not successfully, launched, worked. The main reason is still the North Koreans' participation. But on the minor, areas, it's okay. But I think if you think about grand regional arrangements, and I still need political environment how to improve.
When we proposed this idea, we often cited the concept of the natural economic territory. Oh, well, we're going to open the floor, okay? Yeah, just after this question, and natural economic territory, because Tuman River area has a really great potential to tap many natural resources and into development goals, and the interconnectivity in North Korea and Manchuria and the Russian Far is so poorly developed. Once this development is guaranteed, maybe North Korean authority might have some different view on the opening the door. So in that regard, we have been advocating. Well, I hope that the Aiib somehow allocate at least a certain, even no matter how small it is, okay, funding for Northeast Asian, development is a part of the AIB's potential, lending programs. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I support the idea, for instance, probably within the AIIB and ADB, we can, set up some special projects on that. And also Silk Road projects. Like this Tumen area in the past, Russia was not so active, but now under this Silk Road initiative, and the bridges and roads are, the projects are designed. So this is a way also to combine the different kind of arrangements in the region, and then think in the future with how, the possible future to set up a new institution or not. Thank you.
I'm not a political scientist, but when I observe the East Germany and West Germany unification, East Germany people were always listening West German's television every day. So they knew what is going on. So I think mobile technology, and I hope North Korean individuals can hold those mobile technology, then the information of South Korea, China, will come to their individual in North Korea. So I think the information dissemination to them may be important.
I think that's somehow happening in Korea, although it's not significant degree, and some of them are using mobile phone and to communicate, Chinese and Korean resident in China, even those defectors residing in South Korea. Okay, seems to me I have one gentleman who seems to me immediate questions on our debate, and let me open the floor, and then maybe we may come back. Okay, yeah. Yes. Make it short, please. Okay, we have now about 17 minutes to go.
This is such an interesting group, and to have them together. Paul Evans from University of British Columbia. Let me ask about AIIB from another angle. When it was created, one of the arguments behind it was that it was going to be able to do some things differently than what the World Bank was doing and the ADB. That there were going to be innovations in governance in a context of leadership with Chinese and new multilateral characteristics. Now that the bank is in operation, is it doing something different, either in governance structure, in management structure, how it's calculating rate of return, how it's doing risk analysis? Is this an innovative process that is going to do something that is good for us all, including the existing banks? So if there's maybe compatibility, but is there an element of competition? Is there something new here in this process we should be paying attention to?
Okay, Jang Yong-lin, would you like to respond?
I'm not a member of AIIB. I don't know how they work in detail. But however, you see what we have seen, one that is focused only on infrastructure. But infrastructure cannot be isolated from the others. That is why they cooperate with ADB and World Bank, probably and jointly financed and so on. And also, I think probably similar to ADB and World Bank, and they, I think the long-term return, one way is AIIB does not finance all. They, as still a seed fund to, have to support by the local governments and also invite the private sectors, the PPP approach. So if some differences, I think probably shared experience, but more focusing on infrastructure areas. As I mentioned before, they have now created high standard, teams and work very carefully. And they have a very, the people there told me they have a very high pressure to make it much better than ADB and World Bank. So, and that's probably the way for them to, work better. I just a start.
In fact, I was so delighted that Jim Yong, the president of the World Bank, and signed up a memorandum with the head of the AIIB to exchange in knowledge and how to carry on the risk analysis and how to make lending programs, more formidable. So in that regard, I think that we need a very close collaboration in terms of the feasibility study and the lendings, so forth.
Until now, the spirit is quite good. They would not compete with other institutions. They just to find a way how to cooperate, work together. I think the spirit is good.
There's no question that it's different. And it's naturally different. It's evolved in a different circumstance. It's a bank that had Chinese capital origins, so it's got some Chinese characteristics to it. This is not a bad thing. It was the same in respect of the ADB when the ADB developed with Japanese characteristics. And the evolution of its governance structures is distinct and different from the governance structure of the ADB, the governance structure of the World Bank. So it's different. There's no question it's different. And I tend to agree with the implication of your question, Paul, that this is a good thing, that this is healthy competition in the international delivery of finance to this particular purpose, as Yun Ling says that it also is distinguished by.
You are in charge of the ADBI. Maybe you have some ideas on this.
Okay, I have to.
Okay.
I have two comments.
Quick.
Okay.
Please go ahead.
Quick comments is, okay, AIIB and ADB or World Bank, as far as infrastructure investment is concerned, I think it is the same method, looking at the present value, discounted value. But the good thing for ADB was ADB's decision making became much quicker when AIIB has started. So that's a good part of the competition.
We'll go there and then here, ladies.
Okay,
Yeah,
thank you.
okay, go ahead.
My name is Yamagata from the Institute of Developing Economies, Japan. I have another question on AIIB. Oh yeah, okay. I'm very happy to know that now AIIB, ADB, and the World Bank are working closely, even with EBRD, with the co-finance, so that as long as the head-to-head relations are concerned, it seems the coordinations are going on. My question is on donor coordination in recipient countries. I have some experience in the donor coordination in Bangladesh. Then World Bank, ADB, UK, Japan, other donors attempt to coordinate or at least exchange information, whatever. But at this moment, China was more often far away. And my question is what ADB would do in recipient countries for coordination. Thank you very much. AIIB. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
The first project financed by AIIB is Pakistan. That's immediately received criticism, seems, and China favors its close friend. Really, there are a long list of applications, but that project, I was told by my friend in AIIB, is much better prepared than the others, and also supported by ADB. It seems they can work together because they discussed it before. And as I mentioned, it's not just, the project financed solely by banks. They get also very strong support from government and involvement of the companies. So that's the latest information, I think. But of course, it's how to make, the construction process, and especially in the future, how to get the money back. That's we'll wait and see. It's too early to tell that. That's
About Pakistan's road. In Pakistan, it's already road is existing. That road is financed by ADB already, and it will be connected with China, and that comes from AIIB. So both has to go together.
Yeah. Okay. Good collaboration between two institutes. Yeah. Okay.
But cannot be connected.
Yeah. Okay. Would you like to? Yeah.
Hello, I'm Leticia Chen. I'm from China, but now I'm living in Spain. So I just asked for the AIIB, is infrastructure is connecting people. So it's combined with later in infrastructure and high-speed extension, high-speed train from China until Europe. It's inside the project of AIIB to connect the people. And another thing I counsel about, I think before the gentleman said money back for financial, I think AIIB initiated this idea from China government, but it's just a first idea. All combined, all countries, we just doing the willingness of all the people in this in the one law, one self. It's for connected people, for goodness of all the people. It's not just thinking money back soon. So it's AIIB to have a long-term return money The first one is think goodness for people in the area. Yes, is what I ask you is about if you consider what I say is correct.
Well, I think the high-speed railway is one of the, the many forthcoming project. Yes.
I think AIIB would be very careful, cautious on financing of this high-speed train project because it really needs a big money. Until now, the One Belt and One Road, Silk Road project have two major contents. One that is encourage Chinese participation of area countries' domestic projects, if any kind, through the cooperation. Another one try to create networks, infrastructure networks across the countries. So this is still in the early stage, how to link. If you see China's linkage with Europe, they already start, but it's not high-speed train. So I think this high-speed train focusing on now the first group of domestic project with participation of Chinese companies based on the government support. So they make, so whether AIIB create the role to create a high-speed train system in the future, for instance, between Asia and Europe, and it highly need, but it is need a long time, I think. It's not the AIIB itself. It's need a big money. It's too expensive. So on the priority focusing, I think AIIB is very practical and workable, and also they have to calculate whether they can get the money back.
I think in infrastructure, we have to look at different kinds of infrastructure. Certain distance, truck is better. Then if the distance becomes longer, train is better. But if it is too far, then airplane or shipping. So I think from if we look at United States, San Francisco to New York, everybody flies, not the bullet train, fast train. So we have to look at the various kinds of infrastructure system.
Okay, well, given, okay, let me, just two quick questions, okay, and then we'll close. All right. Make it short, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I'm Yves Tiberghien from UBC as well in Canada. And I had a quick question, especially for Yoshino-san. After the agreement between the US and China last September, which basically gave a truce on AIIB, there was an acceptance of the AIIB by the US in exchange for acceptance of global standards by China. And then in practice, as we have heard, the AIIB has worked very pragmatically with the World Bank and ADB. Can we imagine a new phase, and is there support for such a new phase in Japan among the elites, among the Ministry of Finance, etc., where ADB, AIIB together, as well as with World Bank and others, can cooperate toward acting on the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals, for which the infrastructure demands are so great that we have to go from billions to trillions, as shown by the World Bank. So is it time to move on? And as part of this, is there support in Japan for, a bit more time later, joining the AIIB, which, as Kawai-san, your predecessor, has argued, would have a contribution of lowering China's share below the veto point, right? Yeah. So is there such potential big picture? Can it be part of the trilateral meeting, between China, Korea, and Japan?
Okay, fine. And yeah, go ahead, Yoshino-san.
I think, as I mentioned, even now, ADB and AIIB will go together. And ADB's contribution from Japan is very large. So in that sense, we are already coordinating, starting. And if it works very well, then eventually this system will be perfect. So I think that even the Prime Minister Abe has to follow.
Final question, okay? Yeah.
I'm Jayanta Dhanapala from Sri Lanka. I worked for 10 years in the UN, in the political section. But I'm curious as to what role you see for ESCAP, the Regional Commission, in this area, and for the UNDP. Have they outlived their usefulness? Are they going to be museum pieces, or do they have a role in this new?
Well, let me handle this question, okay? well, ASCAP and the UNDP has been developing various socio-economic projects ranging from the irrigation and school development, water resource development, and also infrastructure. In that sense, I think both institutions really accumulate a lot of the experiences, right? Therefore, I think it is very useful. ASCAP and the UNDP is deeply connected with the AIIB, and we have a good source of contact here, Zhang Yanglin, and after this session, please talk to him on this. Okay, well, yeah.
One word. ASCAP now is organizing, for instance, the workshops and to discuss how to find a way, for instance, integrate different kind of projects and the AIIB and Silk Road and all this kind of different arrangements. I think probably that's a role how to coordinate by the ASCAP in the future from a UN
If I can
side.
add about the research field, okay, operation field and research field. UNSCAP, ADB Institute, and lots of institutions are doing together in various conferences and so on. That is helping to operations. So in that sense, we are doing together.
Okay, I'll give each panelist, perhaps 1 minute each. Okay, let me start first. Well, I always believe that the TPP and Rcep need to be converged down the road, maybe within 5 years or 10 years or something like that. And Rcep members, we should continue to reform our internal structure so that the standard can approach the level of the TPP has stipulated. Without the China, TPP is half-baked. And without the U.S., AIIB is not going to, U.S., without Japan, AIIB is not likely to serve its, whole grand purpose. Therefore, United States and Japan should join AIIB, and China also should join TPP, in the long run, so that we can see that the really peaceful and prosperous East Asian, Asia-Pacific community, and serving for great ideal of APEC, free trade area of APEC, the Asia-Pacific economies. In that regard, I think Australia has been doing very well. You belong to both TPP as well as Rcep, and Peter, you've been also advocating very highly on the formation of AIIB. And so, I would like to ask you final, remarks. Okay, what role Australia is going to play, to ensure that a larger, prosperous, peaceful, the East Asian economic community. Okay, go ahead.
One thing I can't do is speak for Australia, but I can say, make a few remarks about what I think the agenda is, and I think I alluded to it earlier on. I mean, when you look at the world today, there's an uncertain international outlook, and that's the big problem. It's a big problem in commitment to the reforms that Yung Ling said that China has to commitment to the reforms that India has to commit to, Indonesia has to commit to, and so on. Every day, the global economic outlook is being downgraded. There's a stagnationist view that's developing ahead of steam in developed countries, but this part of the world is still a more rapid center of global growth. And yet, you have to say, when you look at it carefully, look at the numbers carefully, growth in the region is well under potential, maybe three percentage points under potential. Why is that so? It's so because, as almost every leader in the region has said, in order to get growth up in individual countries, you have to have massive supply-side reforms. And the framework within which that can be reinforced is generally a framework for international negotiation or regional negotiation. So Rcep, in a sense, provides that framework, especially because of its economic cooperation agenda. And that's the opportunity that leaders have to grasp now if they're going to achieve their goals and ambitions for growth in the region. wherever they are, whether it's in Japan or China, Indonesia or India, or for that matter in Australia. So I think that's a challenge for political leadership going forward.
장영린?
If TPP is supposed to be not ratified as people expected, if China will not join TPP, let's work on FTAP, which APEC launched. Another one, I think RCEP, we find a better model which can fit all the different economies and regions as mentioned by Peter. And the region is really very potential. What RCEP played is to create an open, integrated market on the one hand, and then help that to improve the general environment for, that create a different production network in the region, which is very crucial for the region in the future.
Okay, Yoshino-san.
Okay, last comment is about the free trade agreement. When trade economists are talking about free trade, they will not talk about capital market or exchange rate. So the exchange rate has to be also market oriented. Otherwise, the relative price will definitely be affected. So I think RCEP takes much longer because their capital market is not integrated and exchange rate system is managed. And so I think they also look at the capital market and market mechanism of exchange rate. Then that combines with free trade. Thank you.
Yes, the capital market and the exchange rate is another issue we can dig on later on. Well, ladies and gentlemen, indeed, AIIB and RCEP and TPP, they are interrelated directly and indirectly. Well, I hope the US and Japan will join the AIIB very soon, and also China will join the TPP along with Korea and the other, I think the 5 East Asian nations, including Thailand and the Indonesia, then Colombia, so forth, so that we can see that the really interdependent and transparent and prosperous Asia Pacific economy through enhanced intra-regional interconnectivity. Well, thank you very much for joining us, and they made a special effort to be on time. They deserve a big hand.